The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the dusty road, sending Penelope Jones tumbling against the side of the carriage with a painful thud. She clutched her reticule tighter, feeling the crumpled remains of her map inside soggy, torn, and rendered utterly useless after the unfortunate river crossing mishap 3 days ago. Now, as the vast Wyoming territory stretched endlessly before her, Penelope felt more lost than she'd ever been in her 22 years of life. It was September 1878, and Penelope had left behind everything familiar in Philadelphia to marry a man she'd never met. Mr. Harold Wilson of Empire City, Wyoming, a successful cattle rancher who had advertised for a bride in the Eastern papers, promising a comfortable home, respectable position, and eventual affection. Having lost her parents to influenza and facing the prospect of becoming a burden to her married sister, Penelope had answered his advertisement with careful, hopeful penmanship. 3 months of correspondence later, she was westbound with a trunk full of modest belongings and a heart full of trepidation. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face appearing at the small window. "This here's Porter's Creek." Penelope blinked in confusion. "Porter's Creek, but I'm bound for Empire City." The driver scratched his stubbled chin. "Empire City's another 60 miles northwest. Stage only goes there Tuesdays and Fridays. Today's Wednesday. But Mr. Wilson is expecting me tomorrow." Panic rose in her chest. "Surely there must be another way to reach Empire City." "Not unless you sprout wings, miss," the driver chuckled. "Or find yourself a guide. You'll have to wait for Friday's stage." Penelope descended shakily from the coach, her boots touching Wyoming soil for the first time as the driver unloaded her trunk. Porter's Creek was hardly deserving of a name, just a dusty main street lined with a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a few scattered buildings. Nothing like the bustling streets of Philadelphia she'd left behind. "Good luck to you, miss." The driver tipped his hat before climbing back up. With a crack of his whip, the stagecoach rumbled away, leaving Penelope standing alone with her trunk, utterly stranded. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she made her way to the hotel, a generous description for the 2-story wooden structure with peeling paint. The proprietress, a stout woman named Mrs. Higgins, eyed her with curiosity. "Mail-order bride, are you?" she asked bluntly, accepting Penelope's coins for a room. Penelope flushed. "I'm to be married to Mr. Wilson of Empire City." "Wilson?" Mrs. Higgins frowned. "Don't recall a Wilson over in Empire City." A cold sensation washed through Penelope. "He owns a cattle ranch. He wrote that it's quite substantial." Was all Mrs. Higgins said, handing over a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. Supper's at 6. That night Penelope barely touched her stew, her appetite diminished by worry. Had she made a terrible mistake? What if Mr. Wilson wasn't who he claimed to be? What if the entire arrangement had been some cruel hoax? Without her map, without even the certainty that her destination was real, Penelope felt adrift in an alien landscape. Morning brought no relief. Penelope sat on the hotel's small porch, contemplating her options. She had enough money for a week's lodging, but what then? Return east in shame. Press on to a place that might not exist to meet a man who might be fictional. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A rider approached the hotel at an easy canter, his broad-shouldered silhouette backlit by the morning sun. As he dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, Penelope noted his well-worn leather chaps, the dusty Stetson, and the quiet confidence with which he moved. "Morning," he nodded politely as he climbed the porch steps, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind but handsome nonetheless. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and he couldn't have been more than 30. "Good morning," Penelope replied, lowering her gaze. He paused, studying her with unexpected interest. "You're new to Porter's Creek." "Just passing through," she said. "Or trying to. I'm bound for Empire City." A strange expression crossed his face. "Empire City? What business have you there?" Penelope hesitated. "I'm to be married." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair with a slight curl. "To whom, if you don't mind my asking?" "Mr. Harold Wilson," she answered, watching his face carefully. "He owns a cattle ranch." The stranger's expression darkened. He placed his hat back on his head, adjusting it carefully. "Miss Jones, Penelope Jones." "Miss Jones, I'm Mitchell Brooks. I ride for the Circle B Ranch outside Empire City. And I should inform you that there is no Harold Wilson in Empire City, nor any cattle ranch owned by such a man." The world seemed to tilt beneath Penelope's feet. "That can't be right. We've been corresponding for months. He sent money for my journey." "Madam, I know every rancher within 50 miles of Empire City. Wilson isn't one of them." His tone was gentle but firm. "There have been cases of unscrupulous men placing such advertisements, luring young women west for." He paused delicately. For purposes less honorable than marriage. Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes, but she fought them back fiercely. "I have his letters, his directions. I had a map, but it was ruined when our stagecoach forded a river." Mitchell Brooks studied her for a long moment. "May I see these letters?" Reluctantly, Penelope retrieved the bundle of correspondence from her reticule. Mitchell read through them slowly, his frown deepening. "The address he's given doesn't exist," he finally said. "And this description of his ranch, it sounds like the Blackwater property, but that's been abandoned for years." A tear escaped despite Penelope's efforts. "So I've been deceived. Brought all this way for nothing." Mitchell handed the letters back, his expression troubled. "It appears so, Miss Jones. I'm truly sorry." Penelope stared at the dusty street, the terrible reality sinking in. She was thousands of miles from home with limited funds and no prospects. "What am I to do now?" she whispered, more to herself than to her companion. Mitchell shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with her distress. "The stage back east leaves on Monday. Perhaps—" "I can't go back," Penelope interrupted, sudden steel in her voice. "There's nothing for me there." A moment of silence stretched between them. "Well," Mitchell finally said, "I reckon the first thing is to get you to Empire City anyway. It's larger than Porter's Creek. More opportunities for a capable woman." Penelope looked up at him, hope flickering faintly. "You would take me there. I'm headed back that way tomorrow morning." He nodded. "If you're willing to ride, I can get you there by nightfall. Ride on horseback." Penelope had never been on a horse in her life. A hint of amusement touched Mitchell's eyes. "Unless you've got a better idea, Miss Jones." She didn't, and they both knew it. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." "I accept your offer." Mitchell tipped his hat. "Be ready at first light. Pack only what you need. We'll send for your trunk later." As he walked away, Penelope's mind raced with the implications of her situation. She was utterly lost, deceived by a phantom suitor, and now placing her trust in a stranger. Yet something about Mitchell Brooks' straightforward manner reassured her. If she was found now, as he seemed to suggest, it was only in the most literal sense. The metaphorical finding of herself and her future would be a far more challenging journey. Dawn had barely broken when Penelope emerged from the hotel dressed in her most practical traveling outfit, a dark blue skirt and jacket over a simple white shirtwaist. She had spent a restless night repacking her belongings, selecting only the essentials for the journey. Mitchell was already waiting, 2 horses saddled and ready. "Ever ridden before?" he asked, eyeing her city clothes. "No," Penelope admitted, approaching the smaller of the two horses, a dun mare with gentle eyes. "This is Penny," Mitchell said, patting the mare's neck. "Seems fitting. She's steady and patient, good for beginners." "Hello, Penny," Penelope murmured, tentatively reaching out to stroke the horse's velvety muzzle. "Let me help you up," Mitchell offered, interlacing his fingers to create a step. "Left foot here, grab the saddle horn and swing your right leg over." With considerably less grace than she would have preferred, Penelope found herself atop the horse, clutching the saddle horn with white knuckles. "Relax your grip and sit deep in the saddle," Mitchell instructed, adjusting her stirrups. "Move with Penny, not against her." He mounted his own horse, a powerful bay gelding with effortless ease. "We'll take it slow at first. Just follow my lead." As they set out from Porter's Creek, Penelope struggled to find her balance, jolted by every step the mare took. Her thighs already ached, and they had barely cleared the town. This would be a long, painful day. "So, Miss Jones," Mitchell called over his shoulder as they rode, "what made a city lady like yourself answer a stranger's advertisement?" Penelope considered deflecting the question, but what was the point of pride now? "My parents died last year, influenza. I was living with my sister and her husband, but they have 4 children in a small house. I was—" She paused, superfluous. Mitchell glanced back at her. "No suitors back east. None that weren't after my father's non-existent fortune," she replied wryly. "Mr. Wilson's letters seemed sincere. He wrote of wanting companionship, of building a life together." Her voice faltered. "I was naive." "Don't be too hard on yourself," Mitchell said. "Hope isn't naivety, it's what brings most folks west." "What brought you west, Mr. Brooks?" He was quiet for a moment. "Freedom, I suppose. Room to breathe. Back east, a man is judged by his family name, who his daddy was. Out here, you're judged by what you can do, who you are." "And who are you, Mr. Brooks?" he chuckled. "Just a cowboy, Miss Jones. Nothing more, nothing less." As the morning progressed, Penelope began to adjust to the rhythm of riding. The landscape stretched out around them, vast, golden plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with scrubby pine and juniper. In the distance, mountain ranges rose blue and majestic against the sky. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "In a wild way." "That it is," Mitchell agreed. "Takes some getting used to after city life, but I couldn't live anywhere else now." By midday, they stopped to rest by a small creek. Penelope dismounted with Mitchell's help, her legs trembling from the unaccustomed exertion. She winced as she took a few stiff steps. "You'll be sore tomorrow," Mitchell said, offering a canteen of water. "But it gets easier." "I'm not certain I'll have occasion to ride again after today," Penelope replied, accepting the water gratefully. Mitchell pulled some jerky and biscuits from his saddlebag, offering her a share. "What will you do in Empire City?" The question had haunted her all night. "Find work, I suppose. I can read and write well. I've kept accounts for my father's hardware store. Perhaps there's need for a teacher or clerk." "Empire City's growing fast," Mitchell said. "About 500 souls now. There's the Silver Baron Hotel, the bank, several mercantiles. You might find something suitable." "And if not?" Penelope couldn't keep the worry from her voice. Mitchell studied her thoughtfully. "One step at a time, Miss Jones. First, we get you to town." As they continued their journey, Penelope found herself watching her guide. There was an ease about Mitchell Brooks, a quiet competence that was reassuring. He sat his horse as if born to it, his broad shoulders relaxed, one hand resting lightly on his thigh. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or name distant mountain ranges, his deep voice carrying clearly in the open air. "That's Wytrock Ridge," he said, indicating a jagged formation to the northwest. "Beyond that is Circle B territory. Your ranch." "The owner's name is Benjamin Blackwell," Mitchell explained. I'm his foreman. Been with him nearly 10 years now. It must be a substantial operation if it requires a foreman, Penelope observed. Mitchell nodded. 20,000 acres, over 4,000 head of cattle. One of the biggest spreads in the territory. As the afternoon waned, clouds began to gather on the horizon, dark and ominous. Storm's coming, Mitchell frowned. We need to pick up the pace if we're going to outrun it. Penelope's thighs and back screamed in protest as they urged the horses into a trot, but she gritted her teeth against the discomfort. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain, and the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. There's a line shack about 4 miles ahead, Mitchell called back. We might need to shelter there if this hits before we make Empire City. The sky darkened rapidly, and fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a drenching downpour. Thunder cracked overhead, startling the horses. Penelope clung desperately to the saddle as Penny danced nervously beneath her. This way, Mitchell shouted over the storm, veering off the trail toward a stand of cottonwoods. Through the curtain of rain, Penelope could just make out a small cabin nestled among the trees. By the time they reached it, both were soaked to the skin. Mitchell dismounted quickly and helped Penelope down, her sodden skirts weighing heavily around her legs. He led the horses to a lean-to at the side of the cabin while Penelope hurried inside. The line shack was sparse but solid, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bunk against one wall. A shelf held a few basic supplies: coffee, beans, salt pork. Mitchell entered, shaking water from his hat. Well, Miss Jones, looks like we'll be waiting out the storm here. Empire City will have to wait until morning. Penelope stood dripping on the plank floor, suddenly very aware of her situation, alone in a cabin with a man she barely knew, miles from civilization. Propriety demanded outrage, but practicality won out. They needed shelter, and the storm showed no signs of abating. "I'll get a fire going," Mitchell said, moving to the fireplace where split logs were neatly stacked. "You should get out of those wet clothes if you have something dry." Penelope's small bag, thankfully, had been somewhat protected by the oilcloth Mitchell had lent her. She found her nightgown and a shawl not ideal, but better than remaining in her sodden garments. "I'll step outside while you change," Mitchell offered, already moving toward the door. "In this downpour, don't be ridiculous," Penelope said with more bravado than she felt. "Turn your back and I'll be quick about it." Mitchell obediently faced the fireplace, busying himself with building the fire. Penelope changed as rapidly as possible, grateful for the dim light as she slipped the nightgown over her head and wrapped the shawl tightly around her shoulders. "I'm decent," she announced, spreading her wet clothes near the now crackling fire. Mitchell turned, his expression carefully neutral as he took in her makeshift attire. "I'll see what I can do about supper," he said, moving to the shelf of provisions. As he prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork in a cast-iron skillet, Penelope found herself studying him surreptitiously. In the firelight, his features were softer, less weathered. There was a gentleness to his movements that belied his rugged exterior. "Have you always been a cowboy, Mr. Brooks?" she asked, breaking the silence. He glanced up from the fire. "Since I was 16. Left home in Missouri after my mother died. My father had already passed when I was young, didn't see much reason to stay. No siblings, a sister. She married a banker in St. Louis." He stirred the beans thoughtfully. "We write now and then. And you've never married." Penelope immediately regretted the personal question, but Mitchell didn't seem offended. "No, madam. Cowboy's life doesn't lend itself well to family. Long hours, dangerous work, not much pay unless you own the land." He shrugged. "Some men manage it, but I never found the right woman willing to take on such a life." The simple meal was surprisingly satisfying, eaten in the warm glow of the fire as rain drummed on the roof. Outside, the storm continued to rage, lightning occasionally illuminating the cabin through its single window. "You should take the bunk," Mitchell said as they finished eating. "I'll make do on the floor." "I couldn't possibly, Miss Jones," he interrupted gently. "I've slept on harder ground in worse weather. Please." Penelope reluctantly agreed, settling onto the narrow bunk while Mitchell arranged his bedroll near the fire. The exhaustion of the day caught up with her quickly, and despite the strange surroundings and the man sleeping a few feet away, she soon drifted into a deep slumber. She awoke once in the night, momentarily disoriented. The fire had burned low, casting the cabin in soft shadows. Mitchell was sleeping on his side, one arm tucked under his head, his features relaxed in repose. In sleep, he looked younger, the lines of responsibility temporarily erased from his face. Penelope pulled her blanket closer, oddly comforted by his presence, and closed her eyes again. Morning brought clear skies, and a dilemma Penelope hadn't anticipated. Her dress was still damp and would be uncomfortable for riding. Mitchell solved the problem by offering her a spare shirt and a pair of denim trousers from his saddlebag. "They'll be too big, but we can cinch them with your belt," he said, politely turning his back again while she changed. The men's clothing was indeed oversized but surprisingly comfortable. Penelope rolled the sleeves and pant legs, secured the waist with her belt, and emerged from behind the privacy of the blanket Mitchell had hung for her. "Well?" she asked, spreading her arms uncertainly. Mitchell turned, and something flickered in his eyes before he masked it. "Practical," he said with a nod. "You'll find riding easier without skirts." They set out after a breakfast of coffee and the remaining biscuits. Penelope was indeed sore, every muscle protesting as she mounted Penny, but she found her balance more quickly today. The borrowed trousers allowed her to sit properly in the saddle, and she soon discovered she could control the horse with more confidence. "You're a natural," Mitchell commented as they rode side by side along a ridge overlooking a verdant valley. "Most city folks take longer to adjust to riding." "I've always been a quick study," Penelope replied, unable to suppress a smile of pride. "My father used to say I had more determination than sense." "A valuable quality out west," Mitchell chuckled. "Determination gets you through the winters and the dry spells." By mid-morning, they crested a hill and Mitchell reined his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing toward a cluster of buildings nestled in the valley below. "Empire City." Penelope's heart quickened at the sight. It was larger than Porter's Creek, with several streets laid out in a grid pattern, a church steeple rising above the other structures, and what appeared to be a substantial main street lined with false-fronted businesses. "It's bigger than I expected," she admitted. "Growing every month," Mitchell nodded. "The railroad's coming through next year. That'll change everything." As they descended into the valley, Penelope felt a curious mixture of apprehension and excitement. This wasn't the arrival she had imagined, riding into town in men's clothing alongside a cowboy, rather than stepping primly from a stagecoach as a prospective bride. Yet there was a strange freedom in it, as if the deception that had brought her west had also liberated her from the constraints of her former life. Empire City proved to be bustling with activity. Wagons moved along the main street, cowboys lounged outside the saloon, and women in calico dresses carried baskets from the mercantile. Mitchell led the way to a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Baron Hotel. "Mrs. Thornton runs this place," Mitchell explained as they dismounted. "She's fair-minded and discreet, a good person to start with." He helped Penelope down, both of them suddenly aware of the curious glances from passers-by. A woman in men's clothing was evidently an unusual sight even in a frontier town. "Perhaps I should change before meeting Mrs. Thornton," Penelope suggested, suddenly self-conscious. "Probably wise," Mitchell agreed. "Wait here. I'll arrange a room for you." He disappeared into the hotel, leaving Penelope standing beside the horses, acutely aware of the stares she was attracting. A few minutes later, Mitchell returned with a woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression curious but not unkind. "Miss Jones, this is Mrs. Thornton. She has a room available and has agreed to help you get settled." Mrs. Thornton looked Penelope up and down, her mouth twitching slightly at the sight of the borrowed clothes. "Any friend of Mitchell's is welcome at my establishment, though perhaps we should get you inside before the gossips have too much material to work with." Penelope blushed but followed the older woman into the hotel, Mitchell bringing her small bag. The lobby was simply but tastefully furnished, with a polished reception desk and a sitting area with upholstered chairs. "Room 7 is available," Mrs. Thornton said, retrieving a key. "Up the stairs, third door on the left. I'll have hot water sent up so you can freshen up." "Thank you," Penelope said gratefully. "You're very kind." "Mitchell explained your situation," Mrs. Thornton said, her expression softening. "You wouldn't be the first woman brought west under false pretenses, nor the last. But you've got spirit, coming all this way alone. Empire City can use women with backbone." Mitchell cleared his throat. "I need to report back to the Circle B, but I'll return tomorrow to check on you. Perhaps we can discuss your options then." Penelope felt a surprising pang at the thought of his departure. In just over a day, Mitchell Brooks had become her only ally in this strange new world. "Thank you for everything," she said, extending her hand. "I truly don't know what would have become of me without your assistance." Mitchell took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "You'd have found your way, Miss Jones. You strike me as the resourceful type." He released her hand and tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow." As he walked out, Mrs. Thornton gave Penelope a speculative look. "Interesting," was all she said before leading the way upstairs. The room was small but clean, with a brass bed, a washstand, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the main street. After the promised hot water arrived, Penelope luxuriated in washing away the dust of travel. She changed into her one remaining clean dress, a practical gray cotton, and felt somewhat restored to her former self. A knock at the door revealed Mrs. Thornton with a tray. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting down a plate of stew and fresh bread. "Once you've eaten, come down to my office. I might have a proposition for you." Intrigued, Penelope ate quickly before making her way downstairs to the small office behind the reception desk. Mrs. Thornton was reviewing a ledger, glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Sit down, Miss Jones," she said without looking up. "Mitchell tells me you're educated, can handle accounts." "Yes, I managed my father's books for his hardware business." Mrs. Thornton nodded, closing her ledger. "I find myself in need of assistance. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and this hotel is growing busier by the month. I need someone to manage the accounts, handle correspondence, and occasionally help with guests. Room and board included, plus a small salary." Penelope stared in astonishment. "You're offering me employment, just like that. You don't know anything about me." "I know Mitchell Brooks vouched for you, and that man doesn't give his trust easily." Mrs. Thornton removed her glasses. "Besides, I'm a good judge of character. You have honest eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Otherwise, your options in Empire City are limited. You could work at the saloon." "No," Penelope said firmly. "Or try to find a teaching position, but the school term has already started. Or find another husband." Penelope shook her head. I think I've had enough of that particular venture for now. Smart girl, Mrs. Thornton smiled for the first time. So do we have an arrangement? Yes, Penelope said, feeling as if a weight had lifted from her shoulders. Yes, we do. Good, you can start tomorrow. For now, rest. You look like you've been through the ringer. That evening, as Penelope sat in the rocking chair by her window, watching the activity on Empire City's Main Street, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been on her way to marry a stranger. Now she was employed, independent, and starting a new life she had never imagined. And tomorrow, Mitchell Brooks would return. The thought brought a warmth to her chest that she wasn't quite ready to examine. True to his word, Mitchell appeared at the hotel the following afternoon, his tall figure casting a shadow across the reception desk where Penelope was organizing the guest register. "Miss Jones," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I see Mrs. Thornton has put you to work already." "Mr. Brooks," she smiled, surprised by how pleased she was to see him. "Yes, I'm officially the hotel's new accounts manager and assistant. Congratulations," he said sincerely. "Mrs. Thornton is fortunate to have found someone with your skills." "I'm the fortunate one," Penelope replied. "Not many women in my position would find suitable employment so quickly." Mitchell glanced around the empty lobby. "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner at the restaurant across the street to celebrate your new position." Penelope hesitated only briefly. In Philadelphia, dining alone with a man to whom she wasn't related would have been scandalous. But this was the West, and conventional rules seemed less rigid here. "I would like that," she said. "Let me inform Mrs. Thornton." The restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and a menu focused on hearty fare. As they settled at a corner table, Penelope was acutely aware of the curious glances from other diners. A new woman in town was evidently noteworthy, especially one dining with the Circle B foreman. "I'm afraid we're causing a stir," she murmured. Mitchell shrugged. "Small-town curiosity. It'll pass once they find something more interesting to gossip about." They ordered steak for Mitchell, chicken for Penelope, and fell into surprisingly easy conversation. Mitchell told her about his work at the Circle B, the challenges of managing cowboys and cattle, and the changing landscape of ranching as the territory moved toward statehood. Penelope, in turn, shared stories of her life in Philadelphia, her father's business, and the circumstances that had led her to become a mail-order bride. "I still can't believe I was so foolish," she admitted. "All those letters, all those plans, and Harold Wilson probably isn't even his real name." "People believe what they want to believe," Mitchell said gently. "You wanted a fresh start, a chance at a new life. There's no shame in that." "No, just in being gullible enough to fall for a confident scheme," Penelope sighed. "If it's any consolation, you've landed on your feet remarkably well," Mitchell pointed out. "Many women would be devastated by such a turn of events." "I don't have the luxury of being devastated," Penelope said matter-of-factly. "I've always been practical. When a path closes, you find another." Mitchell studied her with newfound respect. "You're an unusual woman, Penelope Jones." The use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Brooks?" Mitchell, he corrected. "And yes, very much so." As they finished their meal, a commotion outside drew their attention. A group of cowboys had emerged from the saloon, clearly intoxicated despite the early hour. Their loud voices carried through the restaurant's windows. "Circle B men?" Penelope asked. Mitchell shook his head. "No, looks like Sawyer's crew. They work the double S spread north of here. They have a reputation for rowdiness." As if to confirm his assessment, a fight broke out among the cowboys, spilling into the street. Mitchell sighed and stood up. "Excuse me a moment." Before Penelope could protest, he was out the door. She watched through the window as he approached the brawling men, his posture authoritative but non-threatening. Whatever he said caused the cowboys to pause, look sheepish, and eventually disperse, muttering apologies. Mitchell returned to the table, seeming unfazed. "Sorry about that." "That was impressive," Penelope remarked. "They listened to you immediately." "Most cowboys respect the pecking order," Mitchell explained. "As Circle B foreman, I outrank them. Besides, they were making fools of themselves in front of a lady." Penelope smiled at that. "Well, I appreciate the gallantry, even if I've seen worse behavior on Philadelphia's waterfront." As they walked back to the hotel after dinner, the setting sun bathed Empire City in golden light, softening its rough edges. For a moment, Penelope could see the beauty in this frontier town, the promise of what it might become. "Thank you for dinner," she said as they reached the hotel's entrance. "It was a lovely evening." "My pleasure," Mitchell replied. "I'm riding back to the Circle B tonight, but I'll be in town again next week for supplies. Perhaps we could have dinner again." "I'd like that," Penelope said, surprised by how much she meant it. Mitchell hesitated, then reached for her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and startlingly intimate. "Until next week, Penelope." She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from the contact, a curious warmth spreading through her chest. This wasn't at all what she had expected to find in Wyoming territory, but perhaps, just perhaps, being lost had led her exactly where she needed to be. The next weeks passed in a whirl of activity as Penelope settled into her role at the Silver Baron. Mrs. Thornton proved to be a fair employer, though exacting in her standards. The hotel's books had been somewhat haphazardly maintained, and Penelope took satisfaction in bringing order to the accounts, implementing systems she had used in her father's store. She quickly became familiar with Empire City's residents and rhythms. The town was indeed growing, with new buildings under construction and fresh faces arriving weekly. As Mrs. Thornton had predicted, the coming railroad was driving much of this expansion, with speculators and entrepreneurs arriving to stake their claims before the first train whistle echoed through the valley. True to his word, Mitchell returned the following week, and their dinner together became the highlight of Penelope's days. He brought her news of the outside world, papers from Cheyenne, and on one occasion, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. "I noticed you didn't have many books," he explained almost shyly. "Thought you might miss reading." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Penelope deeply. "That's very kind of you, Mitchell. I have been missing my father's library." Their conversations ranged widely, from literature to politics to the changing face of the West. Mitchell, Penelope discovered, was far more educated than his occupation might suggest, with thoughtful opinions and a quick mind beneath his cowboy exterior. "You could have been anything," she remarked one evening as they walked along Empire City's newly constructed boardwalk. "A lawyer, a businessman. Why choose the life of a cowboy?" Mitchell considered the question seriously. "Freedom, I suppose. I need open spaces, room to breathe." "Can't imagine being confined to an office or courtroom." "Don't you ever want more?" Penelope pressed. "A place of your own, perhaps?" A shadow crossed his face. "Been saving for that. Got my eye on a piece of land west of here. Good water, decent grazing. Another year or two, I might have enough to make an offer." "You'd leave Circle B, eventually," he nodded. "A man reaches a point where he needs to build something of his own." October brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of winter. The hotel grew busier as travelers hurried to complete their journeys before snow made the mountain passes impassable. Penelope found herself working longer hours, sometimes helping with housekeeping when the regular staff was overwhelmed. It was during one such busy afternoon that a well-dressed stranger checked into the hotel. He was perhaps 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and an Eastern accent that immediately caught Penelope's attention. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted him at the reception desk. "Welcome to the Silver Baron." "Thank you," he replied, signing the register with a flourish. "James Harrington from Chicago. Business or pleasure, Mr. Harrington?" "A bit of both," he smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "I represent Eastern investors interested in Wyoming's development." "And you are Penelope Jones, the hotel's accounts manager." His eyebrows rose slightly. "An unusual position for a young lady. You must be quite capable." "I try to be," Penelope replied evenly, handing him his room key. Over the next few days, Harrington made a point of engaging Penelope in conversation whenever their paths crossed. He was charming and well-spoken, clearly accustomed to moving in refined circles. He spoke of Chicago's Opera House, New York's museums, and the grand hotels of Europe with casual familiarity. "You seem out of place in a frontier town, Miss Jones," he remarked one afternoon as she arranged flowers in the lobby. "A woman of your intelligence and poise belongs in civilization." "I find Empire City quite civilized in its own way," Penelope replied diplomatically. "Perhaps," Harrington conceded, "but surely you must miss the amenities of Eastern life. The culture, the society." Before Penelope could respond, the hotel door opened and Mitchell entered, bringing with him the crisp scent of autumn air. He paused when he saw Penelope with Harrington, his expression carefully neutral. "Mitchell," Penelope greeted him with perhaps more enthusiasm than was strictly proper. "This is Mr. Harrington from Chicago. Mr. Harrington, Mitchell Brooks, foreman of the Circle B Ranch." The two men sized each other up with the instinctive wariness of territorial males. Harrington extended his hand first, his grip visibly firm. "A pleasure, Mr. Brooks. I was just telling Miss Jones how surprising it is to find someone of her caliber in such a remote location." Mitchell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Nothing surprising about it. Empire City attracts the best kind of people." An awkward silence fell, broken only when Mrs. Thornton called for Penelope from the office. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, relieved to have a reason to escape the sudden tension. Later that evening, Mitchell waited for Penelope in the hotel lobby as she finished her duties. His usual easy manner seemed subdued. "Everything all right?" she asked as they walked to the restaurant. "Fine," he replied shortly, then sighed. "Sorry, just been a long day." But dinner lacked their usual comfortable rapport. Mitchell seemed distracted, responding to her questions with brief answers that discouraged further conversation. Finally, Penelope set down her fork. "Have I done something to upset you?" Mitchell looked startled. "No, of course not." "Then why are you acting as if you'd rather be anywhere but here?" He had the grace to look abashed. "I'm sorry, it's not you, it's just—" He hesitated. "Men like Harrington come west looking for investments, opportunities. Sometimes they find other things of interest as well." "Other things," Penelope repeated, then understanding dawned. "You think he's interested in me?" Mitchell's silence was answer enough. "And if he were?" Penelope pressed, a strange mix of irritation and hopefulness rising in her chest. "Would that concern you?" Mitchell met her gaze directly. "Yes," he said simply. "It would." The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Penelope's heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Well, you needn't worry. Mr. Harrington may be charming, but I've had my fill of men promising grand visions. I prefer honesty to polish these days." Something eased in Mitchell's expression, the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'm glad to hear it," he said quietly. They finished their meal in a more comfortable silence, the unspoken acknowledgement of deeper feelings creating a new awareness between them. As they walked back to the hotel, Mitchell surprised her by taking her hand. His palm was warm against hers, the gesture both protective and possessive. "Penelope," he began as they reached the hotel entrance, "I'm not a man of many words, but I want you to know, Miss Jones." Mrs. Thornton's voice interrupted from the doorway. "Thank goodness you're back. There's been a mistake in the Peterson reservation and they're quite upset." Mitchell released Penelope's hand reluctantly. "Duty calls," he said with a rueful smile. "We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed, already missing the warmth of his touch, but tomorrow brought unexpected news. A telegram arrived for Penelope at breakfast. Her sister in Philadelphia had fallen gravely ill. The message was brief but urgent. "Caroline critical, stop doctors not hopeful, stop come if possible, stop." Penelope's hands trembled as she showed the telegram to Mrs. Thornton. "You must go to her," the older woman said without hesitation. "Family comes first. Your position will be waiting when you return." "If I return," Penelope whispered, the reality of the situation sinking in. "The journey is expensive and winter is approaching. If Caroline doesn't recover." She couldn't finish the thought. "One step at a time," Mrs. Thornton advised. "First, let's see about getting you to Cheyenne to catch the eastbound train." Mitchell arrived as they were discussing logistics, his expression darkening as he learned of the situation. "I'll take you to Cheyenne myself," he declared. "The stage is too slow and the weather's turning. We can ride most of the way, then catch the spur line from Laramie. But your work at the Circle B, Mr. Blackwell will understand. This is an emergency." Mitchell's tone brooked no argument. "We'll leave tomorrow at first light." Penelope spent the day in a flurry of preparation, packing her few belongings and settling accounts with Mrs. Thornton, who insisted on advancing her salary to help with travel expenses. "Consider it a loan if your pride demands it," she said firmly. "But take it." That evening, to Penelope's surprise, several of Empire City's residents stopped by the hotel to wish her well, the mercantile owner who had helped her select suitable Western clothing, the banker's wife who had invited her to tea, the young doctor who had treated her when she developed a mild case of influenza. In just a few short months, she had become part of this community in ways she hadn't fully realized. As she prepared for bed, a knock sounded at her door. Mitchell stood in the hallway, hat in hand, his expression troubled. "May I come in for a moment?" he asked. "It's important." Propriety dictated refusal, but Penelope found herself stepping aside. Mitchell entered but remained near the door, maintaining a respectful distance. "I've been thinking about your journey," he began, "and what might happen once you reach Philadelphia." Penelope waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "You might decide to stay," he continued, his voice low. "Your sister might need you, or the comforts of Eastern life might seem more appealing after you've been back." "Mitchell," he held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I need to say this before you go." He took a deep breath. "When you came to Empire City, you were lost in more ways than one, looking for something you thought you'd find in a stranger's promises. But I hope you found something real here instead." Mitchell took a step closer, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "I'm not a wealthy man. Can't offer you fine things or an easy life, but I can promise you honesty, respect, and a heart that's never belonged to anyone before you." Penelope's breath caught as he reached for her hand. "I'm asking you to come back," he said simply. "Not for Mrs. Thornton or Empire City. For me, because I love you, Penelope Jones. Have since the day you sat on that porch in Porter's Creek, lost but not broken." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes at the unexpected declaration. Mitchell, I don't answer now, he interrupted gently. Go to your sister, take the time you need, but know that I'll be waiting however long it takes. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I should go. Early start tomorrow. With that, he released her and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Sleep well, Penelope. After he left, Penelope sat on the edge of her bed, her mind whirling with emotions. In the space of a day, everything had changed. Her sister's illness, the journey east, and now Mitchell's declaration, it was overwhelming. Yet beneath the turmoil, one truth emerged with startling clarity. Somewhere between Porter's Creek and Empire City, she had fallen in love with Mitchell Brooks. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Whatever awaited her in Philadelphia, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she would return to Wyoming to the life she had unexpectedly found, and the man who had helped her find it. The journey to Cheyenne was arduous, made more difficult by an early snowstorm that forced them to seek shelter in a trapper's cabin for 2 days. Mitchell remained steadfastly protective and practical, never mentioning his declaration or pressing Penelope for a response. Yet there was a new tenderness in his actions, the way he helped her onto her horse, how he made sure she ate even when worry for her sister stole her appetite, the gentle way he tucked blankets around her as they huddled near the cabin's fire. When they finally reached Cheyenne, the eastbound train was scheduled to depart the following morning. Mitchell secured Penelope a hotel room and saw to her comfort with quiet efficiency. I've arranged for your ticket, he told her over a simple dinner in the hotel restaurant. And wired ahead to Philadelphia to let your brother-in-law know you're coming. Thank you, Penelope said, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. For everything. I don't know how I would have managed without you. Mitchell shrugged off her gratitude. Just doing what needs doing. As the hour of her departure approached, a strange melancholy settled over them both. They walked to the train station in the crisp morning air, Mitchell carrying her small trunk, neither speaking much as the locomotive rumbled into view, belching steam into the winter sky. On the platform, surrounded by the bustle of travelers, they faced each other one last time. Well, Penelope said inadequately, this is goodbye. For now. Mitchell nodded, his expression carefully controlled. For now, he echoed. Penelope, I meant what I said. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. The final boarding call sounded, forcing a decision Penelope wasn't ready to make. Impulsively, she stepped forward and kissed Mitchell's cheek, her lips brushing against the stubble of his jaw. I'll write, she promised. And Mitchell, she hesitated, then found her courage. I love you too. I think perhaps I have since you told me I was found, even when I felt most lost. Something powerful and vulnerable flashed across his face, but before he could respond, the conductor called for final boarding. Mitchell helped her onto the train, squeezing her hand one last time before stepping back. As the train pulled away, Penelope watched his figure grow smaller on the platform, a solitary sentinel in the Wyoming snow, until distance claimed him from her sight. Philadelphia in November was gray and somber, the city's familiar sights both comforting and strangely foreign after her time in Wyoming. Penelope found her sister's house easily, a modest brownstone on a tree-lined street in a respectable neighborhood. Her brother-in-law, Robert, answered the door, his face haggard with worry and lack of sleep. Thank God you've come, he said, embracing Penelope briefly. Caroline has been asking for you. Penelope's heart sank at the sight of her once vibrant sister. Caroline lay pale and thin against the pillows, her breathing labored, her eyes bright with fever. The pneumonia had taken a devastating toll on her already delicate constitution. Penny, she whispered when she saw her sister, using the childhood nickname. You came. Of course I came, Penelope said, taking her sister's hand. "I'm here now. Everything will be all right." But they both knew it might not be. The doctor, when he visited that evening, took Penelope aside with a grave expression. "The next 48 hours will be critical. If the fever breaks, she may recover. If not—" Penelope established herself as Caroline's primary nurse, relieving her exhausted brother-in-law and the household's single maid. The children, aged 4 to 10, were being cared for by their maternal aunt in another part of the city, kept away from the sick room for their own safety. Day and night blended as Penelope tended to her sister, applying cool compresses to her burning forehead, helping her sip broth, and reading to her when consciousness allowed. In the quiet hours of night, as Caroline slept fitfully, Penelope would sometimes stand at the window, looking up at the stars and wondering if Mitchell might be looking at the same constellations from the porch of the Circle B bunkhouse. She wrote to him when she could, brief notes describing Caroline's condition and the strange sensation of being back in Philadelphia. The city that had once been home now felt confining, its narrow streets and crowded buildings oppressive after Wyoming's vast horizons. On the 5th day, Caroline's fever broke. By the end of the week, the doctor declared the crisis past, though recovery would be slow. "You saved her life," Robert told Penelope as they shared a cup of tea in the kitchen. "Your care made all the difference." "She's not out of danger yet," Penelope cautioned. "She'll need careful attention for weeks to come. And you'll stay to provide it." The question seemed casual, but Penelope caught the hopeful note in her brother-in-law's voice. "For as long as needed," she promised, though even as she spoke, her heart pulled westward. As December settled over Philadelphia with sleet and freezing rain, Penelope established a routine. Mornings were devoted to Caroline, afternoons to helping the children with their studies now that they had returned home, evenings to household accounts and correspondence. Letters arrived from Wyoming from Mrs. Thornton with news of the hotel, from the doctor's wife who had become a friend, and most precious of all, from Mitchell. His letters were like the man himself, straightforward yet profound, lacking flourishes but rich with genuine feeling. He wrote of winter on the range, of cattle huddled against the cold, of Empire City's Christmas preparations. And between the lines of everyday detail, his love for her was evident in every carefully chosen word. As Christmas approached, Caroline's health continued to improve. She was able to sit up for longer periods, even venture downstairs to the parlor for an hour or two. Watching her sister's gradual return to strength, Penelope began to consider her own future. "You seem different," Caroline remarked one afternoon as they sat by the fire. "More assured, somehow." Penelope smiled. "Wyoming changes a person." "Is it just Wyoming?" Caroline's perceptiveness had always been keen. "Or perhaps a certain Wyoming cowboy? Your face softens when his letters arrive." Penelope felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Mitchell is special." "Tell me about him," Caroline encouraged. "This man who's captured my practical sister's heart." So Penelope did, describing their first meeting in Porter's Creek, the journey to Empire City, and the slow blossoming of feelings neither had expected. As she spoke, the certainty of her love for Mitchell grew even stronger, crystallizing into decision. "You're going back to him," Caroline said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Penelope admitted. "When you're well enough. He asked me to." Caroline reached for her sister's hand. "Then you must. Life is too short and love too precious to waste either." The new year brought improving health for Caroline, and finally, plans for Penelope's return to Wyoming. The winter train schedules were unreliable due to snow in the mountain passes, but a late February departure seemed feasible. As the date approached, Penelope found herself filled with nervous anticipation. Would Empire City feel the same? Would Mitchell's feelings have changed during their months apart? Had her own emotions been magnified by distance and separation? Her final night in Philadelphia, Penelope sat at the small desk in her room, penning one last letter to Mitchell. The words flowed easily now, her initial reserve long since melted away. By the time you receive this, I will be on my way back to Wyoming, back to Empire City, back to the life I never expected to find, and back to you. These months apart have only strengthened what I knew in my heart that snowy morning in Cheyenne. I love you, Mitchell Brooks. Not as a girl loves a romantic notion, but as a woman loves a man with clear eyes, an open heart, and the certainty that comes from truly knowing oneself and another. She sealed the letter, knowing it would reach Empire City days before she would, a herald of her return. The journey west seemed both endless and 2 brief days of rocking train cars, changing landscapes and mounting anticipation. At last, the conductor announced they were approaching Cheyenne, and Penelope gathered her belongings with trembling hands. The platform was crowded with travelers, and those meeting them, a sea of unfamiliar faces. Penelope scanned the crowd anxiously, disappointment beginning to seep in when she didn't see the tall figure she sought. Then the crowd parted, and there he was, Mitchell, standing slightly apart, his eyes searching the disembarking passengers with the same intensity that she felt. Their gazes met across the platform, and everything else fell away: the noise, the people, the months of separation. Mitchell moved toward her with long strides, and Penelope found herself running to meet him, propriety forgotten in the joy of reunion. When they reached each other, Mitchell lifted her off her feet in a fierce embrace, holding her as if he might never let go. Penelope clung to him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and pine and home. "You came back," he murmured against her hair. "I promised I would," she replied, drawing back just enough to see his face thinner than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes but still unmistakably her Mitchell. He set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "I got your letter." "Read it so many times the paper's about worn through." Penelope smiled up at him. "I meant every word." Mitchell's expression grew serious. "I've had a lot of time to think while you were gone, about what I want, what I can offer you." He took a deep breath. "I resigned from the Circle B." "What?" Penelope stared at him in shock. "But your position, your savings for land, I found something better," he explained. "There's a small spread for sale just outside Empire City. It belonged to old man Turner. You wouldn't have met him. He passed before you arrived. It's not fancy, just 100 acres, a decent cabin, good water, but it's mine now. I signed the papers last week." "Mitchell," Penelope breathed, understanding the magnitude of what he was telling her. "How? Had more saved than I let on," he admitted. "And Mr. Blackwell helped with a loan. Said it was about time I stopped managing other men's cattle and started building my own herd." His eyes held a question as he continued. "It's not much to offer a woman like you, not yet, but it could be a home, our home." Penelope felt tears welling in her eyes. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Mitchell reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. From it, he produced a simple gold band set with a single modest diamond. "This was my mother's," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman I loved completely, a woman worth building a life with." He took Penelope's hand. "I knew you were that woman the moment you sat on that porch in Porter's Creek, lost but determined to find your way. I love you, Penelope Jones. Will you marry me? Make a home with me on our land?" The platform fell away, the crowd disappeared, and Penelope saw only Mitchell, honest, steadfast Mitchell, offering her not the phantom promise that had brought her west, but a real future built on truth and love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Mitchell Brooks, I will marry you." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then, heedless of the onlookers, he gathered her close and kissed her a kiss that held promise and passion, tenderness and strength. A kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Mitchell pressed his forehead to hers. "When we first met, you said you were lost. And you told me I was found," Penelope finished, her heart overflowing with joy. "You were right, even then. I just didn't know it yet." They were married 2 weeks later in Empire City's small church with Mrs. Thornton standing as Penelope's witness and Mr. Blackwell as Mitchell's. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterward, held in the Silver Baron's dining room, decorated with early spring wildflowers and Mrs. Thornton's best linens. Penelope wore a simple dress of ivory silk that she and the seamstress had worked on night and day to finish in time. Mitchell, unrecognizable in a new suit and freshly trimmed hair, couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony. "Mrs. Brooks," he whispered as they shared their first dance. "How does it sound?" "Like the name I was meant to have all along," Penelope replied, her heart too full for more elaborate words. Their cabin soon to be expanded, Mitchell promised sat on a gentle rise overlooking a creek, with the mountains visible in the distance. It was simple but solid, with a stone fireplace, polished wood floors, and windows that caught the morning light. "It needs a woman's touch," Mitchell apologized as he carried Penelope across the threshold on their wedding night. "Curtains and such." "It's perfect," Penelope assured him, seeing not what was lacking but what could be the home they would build together, the life they would share, the love that had found them both when they least expected it. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Mitchell's arms around her and the future stretching before them like the vast Wyoming sky, Penelope thought of the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. A deception that led to truth. A loss that led to finding. A journey begun with a fraudulent map that had somehow led her exactly where she needed to be. "What are you thinking?" Mitchell murmured against her hair. Penelope smiled in the darkness. "That sometimes a person has to get thoroughly lost before they can truly be found." "Well, Mrs. Brooks," he said, pulling her closer, "you're found now, for good." Spring turned to summer, summer to fall, and by their first anniversary, the changes were evident everywhere in the expanding herd of cattle grazing the hillsides, in the vegetable garden Penelope had coaxed from the Wyoming soil, in the new room Mitchell had added to the cabin. That new room would soon hold a cradle, for Penelope's gently rounded belly promised another change by winter's arrival. As she stood on the porch one evening, watching Mitchell return from checking the herd, her hand resting protectively over their growing child, Penelope thought again of that day in Porter's Creek. "Then you're found now," Mitchell had told her, a stranger offering simple directions. He couldn't have known how prophetic those words would prove to be, how completely she would find herself, find him, find home. Mitchell dismounted and crossed to the porch, his face lighting with the smile he reserved only for her. "How are my two favorite people today?" he asked, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "We're perfect," Penelope answered, leaning into his embrace. "Absolutely perfect." And they were lost no longer, but found in each other, found in the life they were building, found in a love that had begun with a wrong turn but had somehow led them exactly where they were meant to be.